Okay, drum roll please, because it is the last day of our January challenge. We have been painting every single day this whole month, trying to create as many paintings for you as possible. And this is number 19. 19th was a quokka. So you can see the mom, the little baby in the pouch. And if you want to see me create that video, the link is going to be above in the cards. Today we are painting the 20th painting in the series that's going to happen in January. Commonly requested were hummingbirds. This particular hummingbird is pretty rare. It is indigenous to Jamaica, I believe. It is called the doctor bird or the red-billed streamertail. So it has such unique tail feathers. And I know we've painted a lot of birds in this challenge, and the theme was kind of supposed to be the diversity of life across all the animal kingdoms. But personally, my professional challenge was to practice textures that you find in wildlife. So birds I find quite challenging. Feathers are such an interesting texture to try and paint and to try and paint quickly. And I've been enjoying the challenge of practicing them in this time constraint. So we're gonna throw another bird in there really quick, because otherwise I think birds are gonna take me forever to paint. And we're gonna go jump into it. So one interesting thing to note about this painting is that I wasn't able to find a reference image for the doctor bird. So instead I used a reference image I did have access to of a different hummingbird species perched on a very thin twig, and then I just drew freehand loosely where I thought the anatomy of the doctor bird would go. So we kind of changed the curvature of the beak, we changed the coloration of the feathers and kind of the texture of the feathers as well. And we added the just gorgeous, super long tail feathers that is iconic to this species. So I painted the twig first. I kind of started with a darker brown, and then in the same way I've painted other wood textures before, it's really small here so it's harder to see. I added a medium color highlight to the twig, and then I added a top highlight just on the top edge to try and give it a wood texture. And now we're blocking in the main body of the hummingbird. I really wanted to capture the bright colors of this bird, so we kind of are just using a dark green, dark navy blue background for the bird, and a black background for the head, the eye, and the main tail feathers. The beak has such an interesting red tone coloration, so I really spent a lot of time trying to get that color fairly accurate. And this painting is really fun because the block-in stage of painting it happened so quick, and then now we're at the point where we can just get rid of all the chalk, and I just love that part of every painting. So yeah, so now we're gonna work in a little more higher detail of the beak and try and get some different definition in there, trying to separate the top beak from the lower beak and play around with the different red, pink color tones that I find in the reference images. So I'm looking at 3 to 4 different images to get the coloration and the lighting of the beak, and just kind of getting those as a quick reference and kind of just making it up as I paint. So it's kind of really fun what you can do with paint that you couldn't even do in Photoshop when you're combining elements of a lot of different pictures into your painting. This obviously takes a lot more time than it does just to paint directly from a reference photo, because there's a lot more you have to figure out with lighting and proportions to stay accurate to the species. And as a biologist, I really take pride in it being very accurate to the species. I also looked at papers that measure beak to body ratio, and I had measured it out at some point. It didn't get captured in the time lapse because it's pretty quick, me just placing a ruler there, and it only takes a picture every 5 seconds. But yeah, there's lots of different tricks you can do to draw your animals proportionally that maybe I'll get into in a future video. So when I'm working with the tail feathers, I'm really just trying to capture the individual feathers that stretch down towards the tail. These are part of the wings of the bird as well, but you're kind of just seeing the light peeking through the edges of the feathers there. Then when we're getting into the longer tail feathers, they have such a royal blue coloration that's just gorgeous. And they also have all of these kind of wavy textures as you get further down into the feather. So you can see I'm trying to put on the highlights in that. I do zoom into a closer angle of the feathers in a moment, but you can see kind of just from a broad view now, we're going in and adding the coloration, the highlights in kind of a wave pattern to make that feather look like it has the texture and the dimension in it as it's waving along. So you can see when I paint the second one now, we're kind of adding in those bumps to the one side. and we're dropping in that shadow color first. Then we're gonna go in and add the highlight color just above it to kind of really help get that wave in. We go along the length and add the main tone of the feather that we're gonna try and match the rest to. And these feathers do have a cord down the center, and then they kind of have feathers, barbs coming out from either side. So you can really see that in this feather that we're painting now, that it has that darker line in the center, and then it kind of goes lighter towards the edges on both sides of the feather. I really wanted to get the tail feathers in fairly early in the painting. I thought they were going to be easier to paint than the rest of the body of the bird, and I kind of liked them as a challenge because I've never painted a single feather that's this long before. So I really kind of focused on the bottom half below the branch, and then I readjust my easel here to paint the top half of the bird and kind of move the whole painting down so it's at a good height to paint. And now we're jumping into the eye. So I really wanted to make sure that the circle of the eye, and kind of how it's not a perfect circle, it kind of peeks in a little bit at that right bottom corner there, kind of helps, gives the bird a bit more expression. And then we added the reflection in, and now we're working on the base layers of the head feathers. So we're kind of adding more of a navy blue tone to some of the feathers, kind of like a really light gray navy. And really trying to get some of those highlights around the eye to make it stand out, and around the top of the head as well where the light's catching. Now we're gonna go in and get those really bright blue and green vibrant body feathers. So to do this, I kind of just played around with a few different brushes. You can see here when I go into real time that I'm using a brush that is a filbert brush, but it's a really thin one. It's not the one I normally use. I think it's a number 2 filbert, you can see there. So basically I'm just creating little dashes, trying to get the little hook effects of the feathers and keeping the negative space between the feathers so that I already kind of have a shadow in the layer. So yeah, I wanted to kind of keep a longer clip of real-time footage here to really kind of show this technique, to just kind of do in little dabs to try and get the feathers. And the area right below the eye is where we see the most definition in the individual feathers. In a lot of the birds, it's kind of puffed up right there at its chest and throat. So I wanted to make sure that we had that. And then as you kind of get around the body of the bird, you kind of lose those individual definitions of the feathers, and the feathers kind of blend in a little bit more. Yeah, it was really hard to mix a green color that I thought looked vibrant enough for this painting. So I really kind of played around with all the green, turquoise, blue shades that I could create with the transparent paints that I do. And I wasn't using transparent washes for this because there's so many different colors in it. So I kind of mixed white into it to get my transparent pigments a bit more opaque. At some point, I'm gonna make a video teaching exactly what I mean by transparent pigments. I know that a couple people are confused whenever I talk about them, but this all can kind of be applied to regular acrylic paint. So it's not something you have to worry about too much. It's just a technique I use to save a bit of time. But yeah, I'll make a whole demonstration video explaining why I think it's the best thing ever later on. It does take a little bit of time to get used to. So now that we have the base of feathers in, we are going to be highlighting the feathers. So now we're taking an even lighter shade and just selectively putting where it is on those individual feathers that we've already kind of defined in that base layer. And as we're kind of getting to the final stages of adding detail to the Dr. Bird, I'm really playing around with where to add highlights and how to make the feathers stand out even more and add a bit more contrast to them. So now we're adding some of the darker wing feathers that you can kind of see folding around the body to the edges. And this is also to create a bit of separation from the background, nice turquoise color from the bird. I thought that it would complement the bird quite nicely, and they're kind of a cryptic species, so I thought it'd be nice to have, you know, kind of like more of like a stormy sky forest feel in the background. And now that we're kind of zoomed out here in this real-time footage, is I'm just kind of cleaning up some of the edges and adding in a bit more contrast to a few different areas with a darker color. And since I was designing this painting from scratch, I really wanted to pay attention to the composition of how it was sitting on a log with the long tail feathers. So I kind of wanted to play with the contrast of the width of the stick and the width of the tail feathers and kind of play with what that was gonna look like. And also the position of the bird, how it kind of, the tail feathers all curve to the one side. And then the twig that it's on kind of curves to the opposite side. And I wanted the bird loosely to be, you know, a third from the top of the canvas and a bit more centered towards the right side of the canvas as well. I thought it kind of looked a little bit more interesting than having it really spot on, especially with kind of the way the whole shape of the bird is arcing there. And that's the last painting, oh my gosh. Okay, it's the 31st still. We finished this in the same day like we did the last 3, and that's amazing. This is painting 20 of the 31-day challenge. So although it was labeled as 31 paintings in 31 days, which I did achieve last year, achieving 20 paintings in 31 days is still quite the accomplishment, and I feel so positive about it, especially given what we were able to grow on YouTube during this time as well. So I just feel so grateful that this whole month has happened, and the outpouring amount of support from the community on Instagram, from LinkedIn, new friends made through the YouTube journey have been just amazing. I am so glad that I decided to make this channel and create the videos as an alternative way to engage with the material that I'm creating. So if one person got value out of these videos, then it's worth continue to making them, which is the plan moving forward. So this painting of the red-billed Streamertail has sold. This hummingbird sold already, which is crazy. And that brings my total to 11 sales in the month of January, which a lot of artists experience a lull after the Christmas rush, and they normally have a really slow first quarter. And because it was so busy, you kind of lose momentum a bit. And this challenge is just such a great way that I really appreciate to entirely start off the new year with a ton of inventory, a bunch of new prints that are gonna get released into my print shop at some point in February. By the time this video is out, it'll definitely be released. So I have 25 limited edition prints for each of the paintings in the series on my website available. And it's just so great to be able to create and have that inventory base to kind of take the pressure off the rest of the year. You've already done stuff that has that 2022 stamp on it, and you can just breathe a little bit. You know, you've just started the year off with a bang, and we're gonna keep this momentum going. So in summary, thank you for watching these videos. Thank you for watching until the end. If you want to see the rest of the videos in the playlist, the link's gonna be above for all of the videos in this series, and we're gonna start doing some new cool stuff on this channel. We're gonna get into some more specific tutorials in real time and also work on creating some classes. So we will let you know where we get to with that. And thank you so much for following along the journey. So if you have any questions for me to answer, leave them down below and I will get to them when I do my Q&A for this series. So thank you so much.